Well, overall, it's been a real honor because I do feel like I'm providing a service to Albertans, and it's just good to be able to give that alternate perspective. As you know, Grant, we as physicians are among the most respected and trusted people uh, in our society, and so it's nice to be able to provide information to the public so that they can make good decisions.
Joe, any idea of the number of media interviews you've done over the past 14 months, say since the pandemic started?
No idea. I know just prior to the restrictions being enacted, both in November, December, and just most recently, like 2 weeks ago, I was doing up to 9 interviews a day. So that was probably the peak. And then like yesterday, I did two. Today, if you count this one, I've done two. So on average, probably less than one a day, but overall a lot.
Have you thought when you're doing these interviews that, sometimes, yes, you have to be an advocate, but sometimes you also have to be a shit disturber?
I prefer the term advocate, um, but I've had a lot of chance to think about this, and what makes the difference between a true advocate and a shit disturber uh, essentially is history. So if you could imagine, what if I'd been an anti-masker, right? Like I could have easily taken all these skills that I've learned in advocacy and applied it to something that in retrospect wasn't good. I could have pushed it for anti-masking. So the only way you can really tell if you're on the right side of history is to go through history. And I've been very lucky. Well, I mean, lucky is a term, but I've been fortunate, maybe is the right term, to be generally on the right side of history. If I go through my Twitter feed, there's very few tweets or interviews that I would take back.
Joe, what advice would you have for doctors to, if they're thinking about doing media interviews, maybe they haven't done a lot, but they'd like to get their voice out there as well? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, well, I mean, media training helps, right? Because I think the most intimidating thing is that whenever you're in an interview is you're being recorded, and that can always be thrown back at you. And how many times in history or in a regular newscast do we hear somebody who missteps and is regretful for what they've said in an interview? And so having that preparation is pretty essential. Knowing your messages, knowing what you're going to go into. Like Grant, you and I have talked about multifacets about my advocacy over the last year, and I've very specifically chosen to focus on the positives of the last year because we're trying to inspire people to do more. But every time you do an interview, you have to think of those messages in advance and then apply them. So being well trained and then being well prepared is really, really essential.